delicious sweet and tart Granny Smith apples and scented with a hefty dose of cinnamon. So you're gonna need between 5 and 6 apples. It kind of depends on how large they are. If they're little, use 6. If they're pretty big, like these Granny Smiths I'm using, use 5. You wanna peel them, core them. I usually just cut them off the core, but if you have an apple core, go ahead and use that. And then you're gonna wanna slice them into 1/4 inch thick slices. Have your oven preheating to 350 degrees as well, so that it's ready for you when you're ready for it. I find that it takes a good 20 minutes or even more to preheat my oven at home, and I always expect it to take less time than it does, and sometimes I end up with my batter or whatever it is that I'm trying to put in there ready, and the oven's still not preheated. So if I'm gonna bake something, what I usually try to do, if I remember, is the minute I think about baking something or I'm starting to prep everything or pull stuff out, turn the oven on so that it's fully preheated. This is a great one if you're going apple picking, right? Bring home all those apples, make this bundt cake. Yum! Okay. In this bowl, I have 2 sticks of butter that are melted, and to that add 4 eggs. You can actually, sometimes I actually find it, I probably should have done this. You whisk the eggs first in the big bowl, then add the butter, but I already had my butter in the bowl, so it all comes together in the end. To that, add 1½ cups of packed brown sugar. I'm using light brown sugar. But if you're a fan of a little bit more molassesy, intense flavor, go ahead and use dark brown sugar. Whisk that together. Get all the lumps out. It's very easy. It's like a quick bread batter where you combine your wet ingredients, your dry ingredients, and then combine them together, and you have cake batter. This is my dry ingredients. It's 2½ cups of all-purpose flour with a tablespoon of cinnamon. To that, add 2 teaspoons of baking powder and ½ teaspoon of baking soda, plus 1 teaspoon of coarse salt. Give it a really, really good whisk. You want to make sure that your leavener is distributed really nicely throughout the flour. You don't want any little pockets of leavener popping up when you bite into your cake. Then whisk. You can whisk the dry into the wet or the wet into the dry. I have a bigger bowl for my dry, so I'm going to whisk my wet into my dry ingredients. And then the apples go in there, and then you just put it in your pan and bake it. I'm gonna switch to a rubber spatula just so that I can stir my apples in as well. You can't whisk in apples. All those apples go into your batter. It's about half apple, half batter, I'd say. But the batter does puff up around the apples, so do not fear. Just make sure that everything is nicely coated, and then straight into your bundt pan. Use a 10 to 12 cup bundt pan, non-stick if you have one, and spray with non-stick vegetable spray, or you can brush it with butter. And then get your batter and apples in. Try to get them in there as evenly as possible. This is going to need to bake until a cake tester inserted into the cake comes out clean. That'll take about 50 to 60 minutes. Then let it cool in its pan on a rack for about 15 minutes before you turn it out. Tap it on the counter to settle everything in there, and then just get it into the oven. When your cake has cooled for 15 minutes, turn it out onto a wire rack. And if you're gonna glaze it like I am, you wanna put it into a rimmed baking sheet or something that will catch the excess glaze as it pours off. And then just make a nice, thick, but pourable confectioner's sugar glaze. You can make that with milk and confectioner's sugar. Just whisk them together. And then let it cool completely before you drizzle your glaze over so it doesn't all sink into the cake. Look how pretty that is. Don't be alarmed if you see some little, what appear to be dents in the cake. That comes from the high ratio of apples that are in here, and it's to be expected in the little places where they're sort of hitting the edge of the pan. But that's what makes this cake so delicious, because it's so high in apple. If you are looking for something that's like a little more cake shaped, I guess. You can leave out some of the apple. But I highly recommend using the called format because that's what makes this cake so amazing and delicious. Moist and appley and amazing is all of that apple. Then you just need to wait and let this glaze set, otherwise it's gonna be a big mess. Though I guess if you don't mind it being a big mess, you could eat it right away. It's a delicious apple cinnamon bundt cake. Please enjoy. If you like recipes like this and you want more, make sure to click like and subscribe because we have plenty more.